G'day YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. This is the second hand rubbed coat of Danish oil. Going on to my grandfather's shooting box, which, as you can see, is not Banksia at all. After I sanded off the oxidized shellac, turns out this is oak. Is it English oak? Is it silky oak? I don't know. After the shellac came off, the closest thing I could think of to what this stuff looks like was an English oak table. So old, it had glass balls in eagle's claws cast in bronze on the feet of it, because they had not yet come up with castering wheels for the feet of tables. It came out on a sailing ship to England. So it might be English oak, but it might not. It might be Australian colonial silky oak. Sadly, when I was using methylated spirits and boiling water to get through the old, dried, congealed gun oil and burned carbonized gunpowder and cordite from the cleaning brushes which had been stored here within, some of that stuff managed to come out through cracks. This end didn't get too badly affected. The back of the box, it coped pretty well, but this edge down here, it leaked, and some of that methylated spirits mobilized gunpowder and charcoal in gun oil, it mobilized out of there, and by the time I got to it with the scraper, it had soaked in. So sorry about that. Welcome to what they call patina, artifacts of the longevity of the item. Here I found something of a surprise. Ever since 1974, when I first took custody of this box, I've never been able to get those catches to actually go down into the holes. And I always thought that I'd done something wrong. However, it turns out not to be the case. It turns out my grandfather had apparently measured and calculated and allocated, and he drilled the holes before he assembled it. And what happened was his allegation was wrong, and he drilled the holes at too steep an angle for the radius of the catch to actually engage, and they used to get stuck on the very outside edge. And from 1975, pretty much until I undid the screws and had a look at it, I thought that was my fuck up in somehow not manipulating and operating the system correctly. Sorry about that, Mandy. Consider yourself outed. This is going to have another couple of, well, at least one more, probably two more. One rubbed back. Well, this one will be rubbed back. Another one will go on. Maybe another one will go on that. Coats of Danish oil before the handle, which has in fact been wire brushed and jeweller's rouged and polished, and these two little catches come hither, which have been similarly treated, duly fitted back into place. And there you see the effect of the extra redness imparted by the surviving amount of shellac, which was applied to the box under the handle before the whole thing got weathered. When I was first in receipt of this, it was so red I thought it was Banksia. Oops, golly gosh, gee darn shucks, I was wrong. Anyway, that's how red it used to be all over, owing to the shellac, which is insect wings from the cochineal beetle dissolved in either acetone or turpentine. I'm not really sure because I've never actually used the stuff. But yeah, there's never exposed to the sunlight, and then that's 70 odd years on. Here's the other thing, I always thought this thing was entirely Banksia, which would be entirely oak or silky oak, but I'm not really entirely certain. But that might actually be Banksia, having been put through what they call a moulding plane. See how it's not really truly symmetrical? I think my grandfather might perhaps possibly have made that from a piece of this. Whereas that, it's a ring in. It's a bit of cedar that nobody was ever going to see. Whereas that, in there, in the telescope well, yeah, there you go. That's actually the same stuff. Ouch. This should not be getting sticky. There we go. Had a hinge stick up. Yeah, everything else that you can see, it's oak. And here's the thing. If you have a bit of a look at the proportions of this thing, that there is a perfect square, right? Whereas that there is what they call in the classics a golden rectangle, as is that there. Then the perfectly square golden rectangular shooting box, hand built, from oak, silky oak or English oak. Don't know. Maybe somebody can tell me. But here's the thing. I want you to fully understand this. Look at the edges of the lid of the box. Okay, western horizon, softly lit by clouds. Here we have the box, lit on the end. Let's hope this works. Look at this. This is the end grain of the back of the box. What we're looking at is growth rings which are running from the short side to the short side. This is what's called quarter cut end grain. It's the rarest of timbers. Nobody makes this shit because you need such a huge tree to be able to get a plank this big in which the growth rings run from short side to short side, right? This is the most extravagant possible cut of timber for furniture making. Quarter cut end grain oak. Really, really expensive. So my grandfather made this extravagance. I'm thinking after 1948, when he'd retired, after he'd sold his business to my father, after he had plenty of time, and yeah, he could afford to do this. Dad was paying his meat bills at the butcher's. So yeah, he could run to quarter cut end grain, and that's the only way that you can get that pattern on all the outsides of it. But for anything functional, this is kind of like the absolute worst way to cut timber, because it cups and it twists and it warps and bows, and see how that bit there has lifted up, and see that crack there? That's because this piece is attempting to cup, i.e. it's trying to curve that way, and it's trying to curve that way because the center of the log from which this was cut, it was somewhere out there. This was an enormously big tree, and the growth rings ran that way, around the center of the tree. You have, well, it's difficult to imagine how bloody big the tree was that this box was cut from. But there you go, and now you know. This is what somebody who was born in 1885 thought was a reasonable thing to make, to carry their telescope in the sidecar of a motorcycle from one side of town to the other to go shooting on a Saturday afternoon. So on the one hand, we have golden rectangles on the sides, on the top and the bottom. We have perfect squares at the end of the prismatic box. We have brass hasps that fail to actually match the holes drilled that they're supposed to go into as security issues, and the whole thing is nailed together. Out of flat pieces of wood. There is no, what somebody once described to me as actual joinery anywhere in this whole thing. It's just flat, square, 90-degree edges of accurately fabricated, manufactured wood, literally hammered together with nails. And yeah, it's kind of like almost a brilliant commentary on Edwardian Australian psychology. the local coach builder and wheelwright, who turned a blacksmith shop into a motor garage with his son. He knew enough to be able to make an end grain quarter sawn oak box out of golden rectangles and perfect squares. But even though he was a wheelwright and a woodsman, and he knew how to make a wheel run true, and he could carve it out of bits of wood, and he could put it together himself, because him, as far as he was concerned, this was such a piddling, middling job of work in, I don't know, 1948 to 1950 or so, that he nailed it together. He didn't make any dovetails. It's just a very, very simple box put together like a butter box. And here's the thing for the latest date it could possibly have been. My brother was born in 1941, and he can tell a story about how our grandfather, who had for several years been riding about the town with a motorbike and sidecar, the particular sidecar in which he carried this thing when he first built the box, the sidecar and motorcycle combination that Dad used in the 1930s, and I know he used the motorcycle sidecar combination in 1936 when he went out and he fixed a bloke up on Christmas Eve on the old Grafton Road on the big hill. Went out and took the gearbox off the back of his truck, brought it to town, made him a new pinion shaft, I think it was, fitted the thing, took it back out there, put it back in there on the side of the road, and in 1976, that truck driver was still sending my father a crate of pineapples every year at Christmas, because he had a truckload of pineapples, and if my father had failed to fix his truck at Christmas Eve, the pineapples would have gone rotten and he wouldn't have been able to sell them and he would have gone broke. Okay, so 1936, Dad was using that motorbike sidecar as his NRMA bike. He got out of that game when he was on a breakdown on a Sunday afternoon. He had to go and put his bloody NRMA hat on, get on the motorbike and ride from one side of town to the other side of town with his toolbox in the sidecar. And on the way through town, he got hit by a hailstorm, and he had cuts on his knuckles from the hailstones hitting his knuckles as he's riding through the thunderstorm or the hailstorm to get to the car to get the bloody thing going, because it had a flat battery because some dickhead had left the lights on. And that's when he decided, you can take your North Ryde Mental Asylum roadside mechanics assistance idea, shove that up your ass, because I can't make enough money out of it to put up with the bullshit it introduces into my life. So he stopped doing that, and they still had the motorcycle sidecar combination after 1936, and I think he only did that for a year or two. So that means more or less during World War II, my grandfather's personal transport was that motorbike. At some point, he took it over. And yeah, he sold the business to Dad in 1948, and then he had time to buggerise around with things like a shooting box. And I know from Dad, the first time he took the thing to the range with his telescope in the shooting box, in the sidecar, on the motorcycle, he chipped the edge of the objective lens on the telescope. Now, here's a different story. My brother, born in 1941, he tells a story of being 13 years old, maybe, so 44, 45. And he reckons he saw me grandfather riding the motorcycle around the corner opposite the post office. He was coming down the hill and he was going to go around onto Grey Street. Trouble is, he didn't have the sidecar on, and he was used to putt, 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 putt with the sidecar, but for some reason he'd taken the sidecar off. And therefore he went too slow around the corner and he fell into the corner. And apparently Dad and Robert were at the post office, and they saw this happen, and Dad grabbed my brother, his son, and he said, "Come on, we're out of here." And they just got the hell out of it, and they let Nandy fix himself up with his motorbike that he'd fallen off because he was riding too slow because he forgot he'd taken the sidecar off. And 1941, 1953 or so, that would be the latest date that Nandy was riding his motorcycle, and he died in 62. So I'm thinking this thing is probably a 1948 to 1950 unit when he'd retired and he had what he thought of as enough money and leisure that he could buggerise around with his shooting hobby. And then, yeah, he died in 62 and Dad inherited it. And then I was given it in about 75 because it had the spotting scope in it still in those days with its chips around the objective lens. It never gave me any problem. And now here I am restoring what I would say is about a 70 to 75-year-old item. And would you believe when I showed it to my daughter, even rough bare sanded, the very bloody first thing she said is, "Can I have it when you die? Can I have it when you die?" So apparently, Stanley Clough Wharton's shooting box, inherited by Eric John Wharton, passed into the custody of Christopher John Wharton, restored by Christopher John Wharton, is at some point in time going to become the property of Elizabeth Jennifer Wharton. I think this is what we call old colonial effect, old local effect. Maybe a rolling stone gathers no moss. If you want to be able to hand your grandfather's shooting box onto your daughter, you better frickin' well stay in one spot. Because if you want to move 7 times every generation, you are not going to have any such heirloom to be able to try and play with it and restore it. At least that's how I see life at this point in time. And I feel like I'm not actually doing a bad thing. One of the commandments being, thou shalt honour thy father and thy mother. So why not do something to remember for Kate, your grandfather as well? Warbles on a lot to YouTube. I think I might come from a long line of smart asses. Who but a smart ass would put together a quarter cut end grain oak box, a perfect square by a golden rectangle, and then nail the fucking thing together? Yeah? Welcome to life as a congenital hillbilly. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.